don't know what's wrong with this. Well, don't know. It's not my fault, I promise.
Well,
can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's a bit better now.
Okay.
Great. Well, thanks very much for joining us, Dan. Really appreciate your time. I know it's a very busy time of year as well. So thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Right. Quite okay.
Did you get your daughter to set up your
no, but
Zoom?
I think it'd have been better if I had. Right.
There we are. Perfect. Great. Well, look, Dan, let's get straight into this. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about, I suppose, why you became a trainer. And so the first question I had for you was, have you always wanted to be a trainer? Has it always been your ambition, or is it something you decided later on in your career to do?
No, I probably always was going to work with horses, obviously, given my family background with them. But then I went to university for a year. So whilst I was at school, I started riding point to pointers, and actually my best friend Tom Ellis had his own point to pointer, and we used to go. Then he got two, and I used to ride one. He used to ride the other. We used to go off and just sort of work them and go racing. And to be honest with you, neither of us knew an awful lot of what we were doing, but we had a lot of fun doing it. I got my own pointer then. Actually won on him on my first start, then didn't win on him afterwards, and worked out pretty quickly that I wasn't doing a very good job of it. So I rang up Paul Nichols, and Dad rather rang up Paul Nichols through John Hales, and said, can Dan come down and learn a bit about the racing game? He's got a pointer and he wants to be doing better. So I went down to Ditchit and ended up staying for 9.5 years, basically. And yeah, there was a brief flirtation with university for a year studying design, which I did enjoy because I could do it. It wasn't something that I found particularly difficult, if that makes sense. You're obviously always going to be drawn to something that you find easier than hard. So I was never going to be a scientist or anything like that. But the design element I could do, and you did that for a while, but it didn't compare to working with horses, which is what I'd done all my life up to that point. Stayed with Paul 9.5 years, and once I'd committed to stay at Paul's, I was always going to end up being a trainer.
So obviously you mentioned there about Paul. Do you have, obviously you had a phenomenally successful time there. Do you have any particular favourite memories of the times that you were at Ditchit?
In the Grand National was unbelievable because we'd been through all of the Denman and the Cato situation, and we thought that was as high as you could get. And then all of a sudden along comes this Grand National winner, and he's grey, and it just takes the public interest to a whole new level. Probably the Grand National stands out in my mind as kind of like the biggest, but from a professional standpoint, literally mopping up all those races. You see what Willie Mullins is doing at the moment. That's effectively what Paul was doing when he had Kedistar, Masterminded, Denman, Big Bucks, Neptune, Collonge, and then there's a heap of horses just behind those that a lot of you will know about and have heard of. But they were just going around mopping up all the grade twos. I mean, it was phenomenal. I think there was one stretch of time where we won every big race there was at the weekend. I think for 12 weeks. There was an unbroken pattern of 12 weeks. It was just unbelievable, really. But when you're in the middle of it, it does feel like a big deal, because it is a big deal. Because you're always moving forward and the wheel keeps turning, you don't see it for what it is. It's only when you look back and go, blimey, look at that. That was then. And everyone does get a little bit too sort of like caught up in what's next and the wheel turning, rather than just accepting that today is special.
Interesting. And thinking again about your time with Paul, do you think there were many things or any things in particular that you learnt there that you very much still put into practice today? Did you sort of steal a few nuggets from Paul and still very much see those as the core part of your training now?
When I first started, I did what he did to the best of my ability. I recognise now, looking back, that I fell quite short of Paul Nicholls' standards. To be honest with you, I'm still trying to catch him. But when I first broke out, I was just doing what he did to the best of my ability. I fed the same, and tried to exercise them very similarly, and thought how he thought and how I'd experienced him doing things. So it wasn't it wasn't a difficult thing for me to start, because I had it very regimented in my mind. I was going to do what he did, and it really helps. I mean, there's the four pillars of training are obviously fitness, health, nutrition, and then obviously getting them in the right race. Those are the four things. If you have those things, you're going to do well.
Great. Well, look, Dan, that's a really interesting start to the evening, and later on we'll have the opportunity for any Foxtrot Syndicate members that want to ask you a question directly to do so. So you can either do that through the chat button, and if you write a question there, I'll pass that on to Dan. Or at the bottom of your screen, you'll see there's sort of a reactions button. So if you click on that and raise your hand, we can come to you later on in the evening and you can ask Dan a question directly. So a really good opportunity this evening for everyone to ask Dan some questions, and hopefully you can come up with some searching questions for our guest this evening. So Dan, just going back to your training a little bit, just give us a bit of an overview. Obviously, a lot of people on the call haven't been to your yard. Give us a bit of an overview of the facilities you have and what it's like where you train.
We train in Warwickshire. Just a lot of you might know Stratford, obviously, for obvious reasons. A lot of Foxtrot horses have run there over the years. We're about 15 minutes north of Stratford, just outside of a town called Ulster, spelled Alcester. But we have been here for 9.5 years now, nearly 10 years, actually. In August, it's 10. So, yeah, time flies. We started with one gallop, which was a hill gallop, a 5 furlong hill with a 2 furlong loop at the bottom. That's still there. But that gallop created 500 winners from 5 years from a standing start. So that was, and is, a very important gallop for us. It's a synthetic gallop, so that can be used in all weathers. That'll be used in the middle of the winter when it's -5, snow, whatever. That can be used. About 5 years, 4 and a bit years into training, I realised that a lot of these heavy topped horses, we weren't doing as well with them as we should. And of course, one horse might not make it as good as you hope or whatever, but I felt that there was beginning to become a sort of a trait where the big horses, the 16, 1.5 and up horses, weren't training on the way we wanted them. And a lot of them were getting stuck at 2 miles. And so anyway, we put in a soft sand loop. The first loop we put in was only 260 metres round. Alpha Off trained exclusively on that. And that's at Harry's yard. So we've actually got 3 yards now, but that we started with 1 yard Lodge Hill, where the hill was. Then we developed the second yard, which is Badbury, where Harry's house is. That's got the 260 metre round loop. That was phenomenal. It is a phenomenal gallop. Like I say, we trained Alpha Off exclusively off that gallop, and he won Peterborough chases, and it was third in Ryanair's and King George's, and he was a big high achiever for us. That gallop, the year we trained 205 winners in the season, I'd say at least 120 were trained off that gallop. It's such a good gallop, and it's only 260 metres round. So off the back of that being successful, we bought where is now the stud at Ulm Park, and we took a good chunk of the ground and put in a 5 furlong loop of soft sand. So the sand, when I say it's soft, it is soft. You've seen it. I'd say it comes up their shins, maybe 8 or 10 inches. It's very deep. You can't go fast on it. And speed is effectively what gives you injuries. There's 2 types of injuries. One is speed related, and they're tendons and all sorts of speed related injuries. And second are concussion injuries. Well, if you're only galloping around on soft sand, you're not going to get any concussion injuries. And if you're not going quick, you're not going to get your speed injuries. So touch wood, it's been a very, very good gallop for us. And it's prolonged horses' careers. It's extended their stamina, and it's took them to a new level. And you can see, if you look at our results, you can effectively, if you look at them, you can actually see when it went in. It is that stark. and we wouldn't be without that gallop. I also think correlating with that, horses aren't as tough as they used to be. They're not bred sort of as robustly as they used to be. And we can't now buy these ready-made horses from France and even from Ireland as simply as we could before, because they're so expensive. So you almost have to go back in time a little bit now and make your own horses. And if you're making them, you have to be patient. So a gallop like that lends itself to patience very well. The rest of the yard is pretty routine, really. We do sort of buy into the holistic treatments. We've got a vibrating plate, for instance, is absolutely brilliant, especially for the fillies. It really helps them relax before and after exercise. We've got the spa. We've got a best box, which is basically a body scanner that's looking for hot spots in the horse's body. We've got solariums and all the different treatments, hot and cold treatment, and there's 2 physios on the yard most of the time. We're just trying to create a very professional, very sort of the best we can, effectively. The best way I can describe it is if you go away, if you have a look at our yard and you go away, you aren't left thinking, well, my horse isn't going to get the best there. You might not like me. You might not like Harry. You might not want to have a horse for us for lots of different reasons. But we always like to think that, if you walk away from our yard, the facilities say, well, there's no reason not to have a horse there.
And you mentioned there about Harry and the other staff. And how important are they as part of your team? Obviously, it's a little bit different that you've got a jockey that almost exclusively rides for you. Well, in fact, probably 3 jockeys that almost exclusively ride for you. How important is building that team around you?
It's vital. And the other thing is, as well, is I'm used to that now. So it's a luxury for me, to be honest with you. I don't have to worry about who rides the horses. I put Harry up. If Harry's not available, I put Bridget up. If Bridget's not available, I put Tristan up. Okay, there's some horses that need a little bit of discussion outside of that. I wouldn't necessarily put Bridget on, some big 16-3 lump first time over fences that's going to maul her around, and the owners aren't going to get a fair run for themselves. The horse isn't going to get the best assistance, and Bridget's going to have an awful time trying to steer it round. So we do talk about it, and the fact that she might not ride 1 or 2. She can have that conversation doesn't mean that she's not going to ride the next 2. So she's never in a position where, oh God, if I don't ride this, I'm not going to ride the next one. So that open line of communication and trust is vital. I think it's one of our biggest advantages as a team, that we all know what's going on. I don't have to spend 2 hours on the phone to agents in the morning trying to get jockeys and that type of thing. How people do that, I have no idea. It drives me absolutely crackers. We know who's riding them. We know that they're going to get a good ride, and we know we're going to get good feedback. So it's pretty straightforward. And to be honest with you, over the years, Harry's grown into the role now where he's helping and being in the yard more and more. He sees probably the horses more than I do. He really gets down to the day-to-day of it all, and I know he enjoys it, which is just as well because he spends so much time doing it. But it really is it is a harmonious relationship. It is as it appears on the box. I mean, yeah, there's going to be times when we disagree, but they're not arguments. They're disagreements. And then we decide what the best route of action is. If one of us wants to do something in particular, one of us has to say, well, last time I got my way, you get your way this time. There isn't a dictatorship, because I don't think that if you're getting good advice, you can't run a dictatorship. It's different if you're getting bad advice. You've got to steer the ship yourself. But if you're getting good advice, it's good to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, well, undoubtedly, you've got an outstanding team around you, and we've had lots and lots of questions down from Foxtrot members this evening. But one that may be good to bring up just now is a question about your yard. And the question is, how do you cope? Obviously, you've got a lot of horses in training. How do you make sure that all those horses get your time and attention?
Well, I'd say you split the yard up into, so just say, for instance, we've got the 3 to 4-year-olds. They're the bumper horses for next autumn. Sorry, don't like running any any 4-year-olds in the spring. However good they are, they're always better in the autumn. And I think we've got 28 of those. Well, to be honest with you, they need very little of my attention because they're not running. They're getting used to the facilities. They're building up a strength, a knowledge of how to gallop, how to jump. They're building up a bank of being around, the knowledge of being around the horses. We take them for racecourse gallops. We take them to the grass gallop. We work them up the hill. They'll come past me 3 or 4 times a week. I'll see them. I'll notice them. I recognise every single one of them, whether they're 3, 4, or 10. And I'll watch them jump, and I'll pick out the odd one or two that wants a bit more help, or that doesn't want to be doing that right now. But effectively, those 28 horses have got a little system by themselves. They you have to keep them healthy. You have to keep them sound. And you have to keep them happy. But there's no pressure on them. They're not getting fit to run. They're there to learn and there to get stronger, and they're the horses for the future. So if you imagine, I think it says like it's 28 of those. So that probably leaves you then with about another 120 odd in training. I would say that you break that down then into a third each. So there'll be a third that are in the build up, sort of like the earlier stages of preparing to run. There'll be a third that are about to run, and then there's a third getting over a run. Well, the getting over a run is quite simple. They've just got to go through 2 weeks of kicking the ball against the wall, maybe 3 weeks of kicking the ball against the wall, wait until they're back fresh again, start being able to do some work. So they're going through a systematic program, if you like. Again, keep them sound, keep them happy, keep them healthy. Not difficult. We've got loads of people around them that are watching them. They've got regular riders, head girls, head boys, watching them all the time, making sure that they're happy and healthy and everything's going according to plan. You've got the third then that are building up, which they're very important to watch. You've got to make sure that they're getting enough work and that they are, their jumping is good, their work is good, it's going the right way. You can see improvement in fitnesses. So there's probably about 30 to 40 horses, and then there's probably 30 to 40 that are really getting ready to run. So if you do it like that, you can tell that you can break it down into very manageable chunks. You can't do it without a good team, because I would say between 60 and 70% of horses effectively train themselves if you've got a good system. If you've got a good feeding system and you've got a good exercise system, they will effectively train themselves, because your system is so good and so honed that as long as they do the work for the amount of time required, they will appear at the end of it perfectly ready to go. 30% of them are difficult. 30% need less work because they go light. 30%, those 30% sometimes need more work because they're heavy or they're not quite as easy to train in terms of soundness. So there's probably a 30% of your whole herd that are really, really difficult, and they probably take up 60% of your time. It's no different, I'm sure, to being a headmaster at school. The kids that sit down, they do the work, they do the homework, they don't moan, they enjoy sport. Those are the perfect pupils. Those are the perfect horses. We've all got them, and then we've got the little rascals, and those are a little bit more difficult, and those are the ones you've got to keep your eye on. But when you're in the big yard and you've got good staff, you've got good people on the backs who recognise the day to day, this horse is going well, or this horse is going badly, you can rely on them. A lot comes down to the feedback of the people that are around them. So if you've got good people, you've got a massive, massive start on it. And that is why, and it would be easy for me to say this, that is why I believe that big teams create, ultimately lots of results. Because if we've got, I think we have 57 people working for us. So if you imagine on a day 2 are ill, that's down to 55. Phil, our travelling head lad, goes racing, so he's down to 54. He takes 3 people racing with him because there's 5 runners. You're now down to 51. You've still got 51 people on site watching them all the time, looking over the doors, feeding them, haying them, on and off the walker, physios watching them, farriers going around checking feet. there's 51 people with their eyes on each horse. If you're in a smaller team, and I'm not saying that things are gonna get missed, but if there's 3 runners on a 10-person team and 3 people have to go racing, there's only 7, things start to get tighter. So actually, when you have more people around you, it's a safety net for people to be able to see things. So it's pros and cons to small and big yards, in my opinion. Some horses thrive in smaller yards because things get done in a slightly different way. But and like I say, it's very convenient for me to say that big yards are better, and I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that big yards do things differently, and that's my best example of how a big yard works. The amount of people on the yard that are watching all the time really add to the product.
Now, Dan, you had a very, I would consider a very successful Cheltenham Festival, and obviously a couple of winners at Aintree as well. How would you sum up, from your perspective, the 2 festivals? And obviously you had a run in the Grand National as well. So what was your feeling about how successful the yard was at Cheltenham and Aintree?
I think to get 2 at Cheltenham is one you can get because you due one, if you know what I mean. I think when you start getting 2, it's because you've done it well. You've done it well when you've had 1. Don't get me wrong, but when you've done it twice, I just feel like you've obviously got it right. So that is important. And then Aintree, 2 winners again was fantastic. A runner in all the right races. Okay, there's a couple of grade ones we weren't represented in, but that happens to all yards. Very disappointed that Grey Dawning fell. I felt like he was one of our best chances of the week going into it, and he just fell last down the back straight when he was still going very well, which was hugely frustrating. But I think overall they were good festivals for us. Having a run in the Grand National is fantastic. Lamilos did brilliantly well. He got round. He finished 10th. He didn't quite stay, but it was every Grand National has its own story and its own sort of plot line. And obviously this year was the Grand National that got delayed, which is a totally different story. Not one that we need to get into on a nice evening like this. But when you have a runner in the Grand National, you inevitably get very excited and tell everybody it's going to win, and most of the time they don't.
Yeah, I think we had a run in the Grand National with Hogan's Height, and I know it was a fantastic experience for all of us. And he didn't win either, but we still had a fantastic time, looking forward to the race as much as the race itself. Now, Dan, at the moment, I had a look just before you came on. Last 14 days, a 21% strike rate, which I say as if that's fantastic, but actually that's pretty normal for your stable. So it's great to see the yard performing so well and doing so well. And I think it's great because as Foxtrot members, we like to follow all our trainers, and so we look out for all our trainers when they've got a runner in the big race and the festivals. And I think we feel part of the joy as well, even though they're not our horses, and seeing our trainers have some success. So it's been great to follow you at Aintree and Cheltenham, and well done from all of us on the success that you've had there. But perhaps I can bring on another question that we've had. It appears from the outside that actually the yard has got slightly smaller in recent years. And is that because you've been looking for a little bit of quality over quantity?
Yeah, we have definitely got smaller, and I suppose that's because there's a couple of reasons. One, as your team evolves, you know which way you've got to go. You know where you are better at things, and you know where you're not so good at things. And you try and concentrate on the areas that you're good at, and you also try and sort of make up for those areas that you're not so good in if they're really important. Like, we're not very good at training bumper winners, and that doesn't offend me in the slightest, because I want to see those horses that run in bumpers ultimately improve over hurdles, and then if they have the potential, improve over fences. So like I say, I'm not offended if I'm not the best bumper trainer there is. But I knew for a good while I had to be a better trainer of 3 mile chases. I just wasn't doing very well. This year, we've won the Coral Trophy with Lamilos. which is the old Hennessy. We've won the Beecher Chase with Ashtown Lad. We've won the Betfair Chase with Protectorat, all marquee 3-mile races. So we can't say we didn't concentrate on that, but we knew we had to. So 3 or 4 years ago, when I knew we weren't as good in that area as we should be, you try and push for that. You then have to get the results. There's no point jumping up and down, stamping your feet, saying I want a load of 3-mile chases and going and doing the same thing but running them over 3 miles. You're never going to get anywhere. You have to get the right horse. So what we did is we sort of spread the attention over all sort of disciplines, if you like, hurdles at all distances and chases at all distances, but mostly with an eye to making a future chaser. And I think what happened with that is that a lot of the horses that we didn't feel were going to be able to achieve up to a certain level, we left behind at the sales or privately or whatever. So actually we ended up not buying those horses that we kind of looked at and went, oh yeah, he might win 2 or he might win 3 or whatever. We ended up leaving those behind because your owners are your investors, and there's only so many times you can go to your investors and say, can you spend more money, please? If you're buying a horse to win 2 races and it wins 2 races within 4 months, and you go back and say, that's it, that one's done, can we have another one, please? That's soon going to get a bit boring. So we're trying to find horses to make a career of. And I think that's probably where the biggest sort of concertinaing of the team, if you like, comes to. We just don't have quite as many summer horses nowadays. And that's not because I don't want to support it. I do think it's very, very important. I'm not quite so sure that the really, really firm ground days are particularly great for anybody. And I'm not picking on a particular race course or a particular time of year. I'm just saying in general, the days when it gets really firm and it's too hot, I don't think that is a great advert for the sport in general. But I mean, racing through May and the first part of June or even all of June is fantastic. Maybe all of July doesn't need to be participating quite as strong, and maybe all of August the same. I had a lot of winners through the summer, and I enjoyed every one of them. And hopefully I have a lot of winners through the summer this year, and I'll enjoy every one of those as well. And I know Foxtrot do as well. And I don't want to get away from summer racing because I think, like I say, it's got a very, very important part to play. But I do think we have got to be a little bit careful going forward that we're not sort of like enhancing that. We're not sort of like hammering that home too much, if that makes sense. I think we've got to finding horses for good ground is great. I think when you start sort of scouring the pages for sort of completely firm ground horses, I don't think that's the direction that we should be going in. So that's probably a little way of how we sort of crept down in numbers as well.
Now, I said at the start, if any Foxtrot members have got any questions for Dan, but actually someone sent me a question. I think maybe they've got muddled up down to Dan. So I've had a question from Julie who says, what's the most important thing you look for when you are looking at buying a horse? Well, I think the answer to that is, one, we want a spread of horses within Foxtrot. We don't want them all to be the same. And it's really nice to have different types of horses within the sort of portfolio and the stable of Foxtrot, which is very important to us. But I think perhaps the most important thing is where the horses come from. And that's absolutely vital to me. Want it to come from a yard that we know has looked after the horses in a way that means they're going to be sound and healthy. We can trust that yard from that perspective, but also ideally a yard that's we're going to improve from, and a yard that's maybe not had many winners, that we really think that we could send our horses. And I think we've got some terrific trainers, and when we send our horses to good trainers, that those horses are going to improve, and that to me is perhaps one of the most important things. Now, on that subject, I should mention, Dan rang me up and told me that he's had a horse arrive in his yard today, funnily enough. So Mumford's Magic, Dan. So this is going to be, here's an exclusive for everyone, our new Foxtrot horse with Dan Skelton. So Dan, tell us about Mumford's Magic.
Mumford's Magic is by Dylan Thomas, who is obviously the sire of Ahoy Senor, and actually we've got a runner by him tomorrow called Boom Born, who I think will go very well at Cheltenham. I think this horse wants a bit of nice ground. Like I've just said, we're trying to sort of keep away from firm ground. And this horse definitely isn't a firm ground horse, but he is certainly a good ground horse. He had a couple of runs on just unraceable conditions, to be honest with you. I think they were local point to points to the guy who trained him. And I think it was I think it might have been an easy trip to make to go to these point to points rather than somewhere else. And he ended up running in terrible conditions, traveling well and not getting home. Anyway, he had one run on much better ground and ran very, very nicely. He wasn't beaten all that far. I think he finished third. I went and saw him in Ireland. He's a nice, big, scopy horse. And when you asked me before about sort of how the team's looking, you've got to have a horse that's got something to grow into. You've got to have a horse that's got some future. And the thing is, if you're buying horses that, like I said to you, just, we'll try and win 2 with this and exit stage left, that's not really what we should be doing. This horse, I feel, we can start in bumpers because I feel he's got that bit of speed. And he certainly showed a lot more boot than a lot of his rivals when he hit some good ground on his last run. He'll then go over hurdles, and he's got all the scope to go and be a chaser. So he is a horse that I think will just improve, not just improve through this year. I think he'll improve again through next year. So I'd like to start him in a bumper at an appropriate time, then go hurdling. And then I think you'll find that you've got a horse that can then go chasing as well. He will be on the go. He will definitely be on the go through the summer months, the spring and summer months. But like I say, we won't be hunting for really firm ground. He doesn't need that. But there's going to be lots of opportunities for him. And I think we've had a number of horses together, us and Foxtrot, and we've been pretty formidable. As you have with all your other trainers, to be fair, Dan, picking the right horses that, like you say, do improve. I think this horse could be the type, though, that just gets a second year at it. Sometimes you can buy a second-hand horse that you might think it hasn't got, like, it's got maybe a year, 18 months at it. I don't think this horse is like that. I think this horse will have a second roll of this. So I think we can definitely go into 2 seasons. And if he proves good enough, you go on and you do more. But it's nice to have a horse that can improve for a number of different disciplines. So a bumper will be a start, hurdle will be better, and ultimately a chase is best. So he's here, he's arrived. What we'll do with him is we'll probably have him in and out the field for a couple of 3 weeks, just let him settle in, acclimatise. You go and get him used to the new regime, get him used to the feed, and just let him find his feet. Then build him up and run him when it's appropriate.
Dan, you sent me a very short sort of video of him over in Ireland. I think you went over to Ireland, didn't you? So
yeah.
I'll play this video, but you can talk over it. So obviously you went and saw him, I believe.
Yeah. He was at a very rustic farm in Cork. This is actually the yard where Native River lived. They had him here when he ran in a point to point. Obviously, Tom Malone bought him, and then he ended up winning a Gold Cup. As you can see, he's a nice big horse. He walks very nicely. He's quite active, actually. He's not a big, sort of cumbersome horse. He's an athlete. I just liked him. I thought there was a lot of improvement in him, and he was very straightforward to vet. The only thing he does do is he's a bit of a box walker, but like I say many times, what they do in their own time's up to them, as long as they run when we ask them to.
Great. Well, look, Dan, that sounds great, and thanks for offering him to us first, because I know you've got a long list of owners wanting to have horses with you at the moment. So glad you put him to us, and he looks exactly the type of horse that I think we should be getting involved in. So I will forward on some details about him for anyone that's keen to get involved with Mumford's Magic. And great to have another horse with you, Dan. Great. Well, let's move on from that, and let's just look ahead. And we've got Ridgeway running. I think, is it going to be declared heir? Is that the plan?
He will, yeah. I don't think there's any rain at all forecast. I mean, the way when we entered, I think we were entering maybe on soft, good to soft, or good to soft, soft. I can't quite remember. I also entered another horse in there called Real Stone, and whichever way the ground was going to go would depend on which horse ran. But I honestly always thought it would dry out, and it was always going to be Ridgeway's race. The track will be absolutely perfect for him. It's basically downhill from 4 out to 2 out. It's a real fast track. It's a great track on good ground for a good ground horse. And he's very, very fresh. He's very fit. He's very healthy. He's working well. There's no excuses.
Wow, that's good to hear. And Dan, tell us, what else have you got running? Now, you've got Sail Away in the Scottish National. Is he going to run?
No, I think I'll run him in. So the first race I'm going to run Fred Arms on the Saturday. He's in a pretty good listed chase. I think he'll take a lot of beating. The second race is a novices handicap chase worth a few quid. I think Sail Away is the one for that. He's in good form, and we've kept him with this in mind. In the Scottish Champion Hurdle, we're going to run Lotus Sud. He'd definitely have a big chance. He's been thereabouts whenever he's ran. He just hasn't quite found the post yet. I'm not saying he absolutely will in this. There's no question he'll win, but I do think he'll be in the 3. We've then got Unexpected Party in the Rising Stars. Ran well at Cheltenham last time. Has to be in the 3. I think it's a really good track for him, actually. And then, yeah, the big one, I'm not quite sure yet. I might just leave it up to the others yet.
Got to give them a chance at some point, haven't you? Right. Well, look, we really
you can get on the road easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, we're really looking forward to seeing Ridgeway. And just before we delve into some questions from Foxtrot members, if you've got time, I thought we'd just do a very quick video just to remind everyone about how we've gone on with Ridgeway.
Callisto King in behind, Fox Hollow, Scudamore still in there, then Craig and White Hare. They've got one left to jump now, and it's Ridgeway still tanking along. Imperial Hope, Scudamore, then Fox Hollow, and then Callisto's King from Craig and White Hare as they run to the last, and it's Ridgeway. First run from the Skeltons with Eve Johnson-Horton on the flat, gets over the last in front, and is now just being ridden along to Scudamore and Fox Hollow. Imperial Hope is weakening. Ridgeway driven out here with Scudamore and Fox Hollow, both chasing hard, one behind the saddle for Ridgeway. He's 2.5 to 3 lengths clear, and Ridgeway makes a winning start over hurdles. Fox Hollow second, Scudamore third, Callisto's King might have snatched fourth from Imperial Hope.
At this point, Hammer and Tongs up front, presuming Ed and Colestock, shadowed by the grey Ridgeway, who's just being moved into the race steadily by Harry Skelton, and this is 3 from the finish. Colestock takes over. Presuming Ed is joined by the improving Ridgeway, then Long Call, Hasty Parisian, as jumping has never warmed to the task, so down towards the second last. Colestock pressed by Ridgeway on one side, Long Call on the other. It's Ridgeway who jumped to the lead over 2 out, has the advantage from Colestock. Long Call is back in third, then Presuming Ed, and it's Ridgeway down towards the last with a growing advantage. Ridgeway jumped it really well as well, attacked it. Colestock and Error in second, Long Call in third, then Presuming Ed and Hasty Parisian. Quite a nice chasing debut here for Ridgeway, for Dan and Harry Skelton, and the sire, first winner over fences with his first runner. Ridgeway beat Colestock, third for Long Call, fourth for Presuming Ed, and Hasty Parisian just never.
Well, it's great to see Ridgeway winning, and well done to Dan for his training performances with him so far, and hopefully a little bit more fun to be had with him, particularly on Friday. Now, Dan, we saw that's a horse that was very much sort of bred for the flat, ran on the flat. You see how well he jumped both over hurdles, but then over fence as well. So let me bring in one of the questions that we've had, which is from Deborah, who'd like to know a little bit about do you ever go to your dad for some advice about the horses and their jumping?
Sometimes we might ask him very deep technical questions if we're struggling with one particular horse or another, and what it should do or what we can do with it. But the big difference between show jumping and racing is the speed they go. you can actually control a racehorse if you go slowly. It's when you start going upwards of 30 miles an hour, they become less adjustable, because momentum and sort of forward motion is in play in a very different way to what it would be in show jumping. But I would say that not looking to credit my father, but he instilled in us a long time ago, and it never left us, how to teach a horse to jump and what to look out for and how to perfect it the best you can. What you must remember is any horse can only be 100% fit, and any horse can only jump to 100% of its ability. So you may look at imperfect jumpers and say that horse can be improved upon jumping wise. That's not always the case. Some horses, what you see is as good as they can be. They can't actually jump any better than that. There might be a physical restriction, there might be a mental restriction, there could be anything. Not every bad jumper can improve to be a good jumper. If you teach them right at the start, they'll be the best jumper they can be, and after that, they've got to understand that it is a bit up to them. And no matter how much training you do, once you go down to 2 out and the last, and you're in the red, what happens there is horses' instinct takes over, and they revert back to whatever it is that they have to do to get over that jump or to get over that hurdle, to get past the line. That's why horses hang. Horses don't hang because they're left-handed or right-handed. They hang because they come under pressure, and one side is stronger than the other. Just like a human's, one side is stronger than the other, and they will go that way because they are trying in the extreme. So it's not necessarily something that you can perfect 100%, just like you can't perfect a running gait 100%, because when they get into that red zone, they're going to do whatever it is that they can to get past that line.
Dan, let's just carry on with our questions, because I know we're running out of time. Martin has asked, sorry, these are slightly random, so I'm sorry to pick your brains in a slightly random order here. Martin has asked, you've had tremendous success at Cheltenham and in other big handicaps, but how far ahead do you start to target these sort of races, or do you see how the season progresses and then just move on to those handicaps?
Some and some. So you might be surprised at how one particular horse improves, and then that becomes obvious. A novice might become obvious for a handicap or a particular race. But I already know sort of pre-Christmas. So when the horses come in for October to Christmas, I already know sort of which horses want to be running in which races already, as long as they get a clear run and as long as it's right, because you've got to plan a long way out. Thing is, there's no point having a horse 100% fit for extended periods of time, because it's just a waste of time having them that fit. You want them fit for when you want them fit. You don't want them fit just for the sake of having them fit. So if you're picking just say for instance, you're picking a Coral Trophy, and the horse I'm going to aim at for that next year is I might and probably will aim Lamilos there, but I'll also aim Midnight River. So there's no point having Midnight River fit the last week of October. He needs to be fit the last week of November. So if you plan those races out, you can hit them the best shape you can be in. And I think over a career, you'll find that you've done better. It might not make a difference over a week or a month, but I think over a career, you can find that you're probably more successful if you can plan them out.
And talking of planning, Andy has asked, who in your yard does all the race planning and the entries?
I do them all. I spend all night entering them. I enter everything. I enter most things the night before, maybe 2 days before the entries close as well. And then I do all the declarations the night before as well. I'm always looking for races. I don't have any system or computer system or anybody else helping me. The feed in I would have for the data input would be from Harry, Bridget, Tristan, and then me.
Brilliant. Well, you must be a very busy guy, so thank you again for your time this evening. And look, we've probably got time for a couple more questions, but if anyone wants to ask Dan a question directly, just feel free to put your hand up. You can use the reaction button at the bottom. It'd be great to have a different voice other than me asking some questions. So if you want to ask Dan a question directly, do raise your hand and we'll come straight to you. Dan, just got one more here from the chat. Ridgeway, I'm just finding it here. Ridgeway often seems to run well fresh. Is there any explanation why some horses run well with a gap between their races?
Horses run well fresh because of the output that they get, because of output of energy and physical exertion. So it's not that a horse needs to be fresh. What it needs to be is it needs to have a full tank of fuel, and its muscles need to be at the best. They need to be supple, not tired. They need to be ready for it. So the gap between is not necessarily a freshness; it's a recovery. And a lot of horses, you got to remember, horses are inherently genuine. They all try, unless there's a physical or sometimes mental restriction to stop them trying. So they all try, they all put in a big effort. Thing is, nowadays, is so many horses are fit, they can put in big efforts all the time at their level. It doesn't necessarily just have to be in a Gold Cup, but a 0 to 120 on a Wednesday, if there's 5 really, really fit horses in there, all fresh, that's going to be a very difficult race for all of those horses, because that's their level and that's what their output is. They're going to need time to get over that. So actually, it's not just the fact that they're fresh and it's almost like, oh, good, I'm going racing, I can't wait, isn't that fun? It's not like that. It's they are recovered to run their best.
And that, from your point of view, must be a bit of a balancing act, because obviously you need to work them hard at home to get them fit, but make sure you leave enough on the race course. So presumably you must have to almost know the individual horses to know how much work you can give them.
Easy to train a horse first time up. You just do a lot of work. You make sure they're eating. As long as they're eating, the more they eat, the more fuel you put on the fire, the higher the flames burn. So you keep feeding them hard, keep working them hard, and go somewhere fresh first time. That's the easiest way to train a horse. That is the easiest. Make no mistakes. It's then afterwards getting them to recover and then go again. That's when it starts getting difficult. In Ridgeway's case, he's a good eater. So what you can do is, once you've got him fit, you have to trust him to then be fit. And the best way to have him after that is to promote well-being. Don't try and promote fitness. There's no such thing as 101% fit. You cannot be 101% fit. Second you start trying to achieve that, you go backwards, you overtrain, you get small muscle tears or worse, and you go backwards. So you can only have a horse 100% fit. You're better off being 98% fit and knowing that everything's okay than having overtrained and knowing you're on the downhill. You just don't want to be on that downhill slope overtraining horses. It's a disaster.
Dan, thank you very much indeed for your time this evening. I'm sorry we've not got through all the questions, but I know the evenings are important. Well, I thought they were family time, but it sounds to me like it's planning time for your racing. So thanks very much for giving up time this evening to be with us. It's been really interesting. We've discussed lots of things, from your time at Paul Nicholls through to the festivals, through to our new purchase with you, to your training, buying horses, and we've covered lots and lots of ground. I think we've all found it very, very fascinating. So Dan, thanks for all your efforts with our horses. Good luck up at Ayr, both with Ridgeway but also your other runners up there, and congratulations on what's been an outstanding season.
Thank you. Well, I presume I'll see a few members up at Ayr. And the rest of them I'll see at the golf course.
Right. But we should get you on our team, actually, Dan. We've got a so the Racehorse Syndicate Association have organised an inter-syndicate competition. So like Foxtrot would take on Midland Park or Highclere or Owners Group. So we'll have to make sure we get you on our team.
I need to be a bit better handicapped than I am at the moment, Dan.
Don't worry, I set the handicap for the competition. So
lovely.
Great. Well, Dan, thanks again. And thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. I really appreciate everyone taking the time out. We're going to have a little bit of a break from our forums now because we're getting into the summer, and obviously we've got evening racing starting. So we'll have a little bit of a break, but they will resume after the summer period. But it's been great. I hope everyone's enjoyed meeting all the different guests that we've had on. I really appreciate everyone joining us. Thanks again for all your support with Foxtrot Racing. It really is appreciated. And very much look forward to seeing everyone at the stables or at the racecourse very soon. But thanks again.